Hey everyone, Jim here, and in this video, I'm going to give you an introduction to the Linux command line interface, also known as a CLI. So Linux is a common open source operating system that is used for a variety of purposes. And the commands I'm going to show you in this video are going to be transferable to most Linux distributions you might come across in the world. The Linux distribution I'm using for this video is known as Kali Linux. It's a version of Linux that is customized for IT and cybersecurity professionals. There are going to be other Linux commands you might come across that work in one distribution and not another. And those are some nuances you're going to learn about and become more familiar with as you get more and more experience. So understanding how the command line interface works within Linux is going to be really important, especially more so than if you were just using Windows, for example. Linux historically has been a more technical operating system, typically reserved for either use by IT professionals or use for special purposes, such as a server. Because of that and the type of users that would typically use a Linux system, the applications are designed to be more, technical to use. There's some benefits for that. They can be scripted and automated easier and much more quickly. But there's some downsides as well. Obviously, command line interfaces can be complicated and challenging to use if you're not familiar with them. So to access a command line interface in Linux, you want to launch a terminal. Now, this terminal is going to be a little bit different depending on your Linux distribution, and you can access it either locally, like I'm going to do today, or remotely by remoting into Linux system by using something like SSH, which stands for Secure Shell. Within Kali Linux, to get to the terminal, in the taskbar, you can click this little black box at the top here, and that will launch it. I'm going to make this terminal box bigger so it's easier for everybody to see. To do that, you can hold down Control and the plus key on your keyboard, and that will make it a little bit larger. So I'm going to first kind of describe what you're seeing here before I show you any of the actual commands. So you see Kali at Kali. What this is your username at the host name, so whatever server you're currently connected to or have the terminal open on. I'm using just a general Kali Linux install that I just grabbed off of the Offensive Security website. So the default username is Kali and the default host name is Kali. So I'm Kali at Kali. Let's say I was using my Windows computer and I was SSH'd or remotely connected to a LAMP server and the LAMP server's host name was LAMP. This might say Jim at LAMP. This next thing you see in these two brackets, this is going to tell you your current working directory or your present working directory. PWD is another way to remember that. And you see this tilde in here, this little squiggly. This means you are currently in your home directory. In Windows, that would be the equivalent of being in your C drive, then under users, and then your username, so like Jim in my case. And then within Linux, this just means your home directory. Typically, there's either a home or a root folder within the root of the file system, and then you might have a folder within that. And then finally, one line below here, you have that blinking cursor that you can use to enter in commands. And this $sign essentially indicates whatever line you currently are on a terminal. So this is where you will know any text you enter in will appear right here. So let's start with just a few basic commands. So I'll start with ls, which will list out any files, folders, or any other objects you have in your file system. And as you can see, because I'm in my home folder, I see desktop, documents, downloads, all those typical user-related folders that you would expect to see in a home directory. Now, these are all blue because I don't have any files. But one thing I do want to note, what is really cool with the terminal in particular, is depending on your Linux version, it will color code objects. So folders will show up in a certain color, such as blue, and files will show up in another color. And if files have certain permissions applied to them, they'll show up in other colors as well. So it makes it really easy to identify what is what and what permissions are assigned to various objects within a file system. Now, let's say I want to navigate into the downloads directory as an example. To do that, you're going to use a command known as cd. This stands for change directory. And some terminals will autofill with suggested options, like this one says right here, downloads. Others won't, especially if you're using like a remote client, like an SSH client. It probably won't do that, but the more consumer-oriented Linux distributions like Kali Linux and Ubuntu, those will have some of these nice quality of life features built in. So I can type in downloads, and I'm now in the downloads directory. In fact, you see that my working directory now has changed to home directory /downloads. I can type in ls, and now I notice this red text. And before, as you saw, directories are color-coded in blue. This red text actually indicates a file. So this is a file that is my downloads directory. I've used this Kali Linux box before, or virtual machine is probably a more accurate term. I've used this Kali Linux virtual machine before to run Nessus just for from lab purposes. So you see that that file is still in here. If you wanted to move up one directory, to do that, you can type in cd and then ... This essentially says, take me back or up one level. And when you do that, now, as you can see, I'm back in my home directory. A lot of times, if you are trying to navigate into a file or folder or do some sort of action, you might also see someone cd and then a / and then the folder name. What this essentially means is navigate into the downloads directory from my current position. That's what this period indicates. The more you learn about file systems, you're going to learn there are things known as absolute file paths and relative file paths. This is a relative file path, but it's saying from my relative position, take me into the downloads directory. And we'll explain why this is important in a second here. So if you're familiar with Windows, you probably know there is like a C drive and you have maybe a D drive. You have a drive letter for each of the physical storage mediums you have installed in a system. With Linux, it's a little bit different. You have a file system and you can take storage like individual drives and USB devices, and you can mount them to various mount points within a file system. So what that means is you don't have a drive letter within Linux. The highest point within a Linux file system is known as root. So if I change directory into just /, it's going to take me into the root of the file system. And this is where all of those system directories live. So if you're familiar with Windows, you have, the Windows directory, and then you have System32, and then users, and a bunch of other Windows-specific things. With Linux, these are kind of the generic specific things you're going to see. These are pretty common throughout most operating systems, but it will vary depending on the specific thing that you're using. I can't go any higher than this. There aren't drive letters. So if you have two hard drives, you might have one hard drive mounted under home, and then another hard drive mounted under files or some other file location. And that's the way that it works. So you can move into the home directory, and then you can navigate into user directories. Now, because I only have one user in this Kali Linux virtual machine, all I see right there is just Kali, and I can navigate into Kali. Now, I'm going to go back to the home directory, back to the root directory. And let's say I'm here and I wanted to move all the way into downloads. That's a couple directories deep. To do that, you can go into cd and do /home/Kali/downloads. And you can navigate all the way there at once. If you wanted to move back, let's say from here to the home folder, you could actually do this, cd ... This is going to say, take me back 2 folder levels. So from my present directory, 2 additional dots back. And now, as you'll see, it should actually be cd ... and then I get to my home folder, and I can hit the up key on my keyboard, .. and it'll take me one more directory back to my home folder. Now, from here, there's a couple different things I could show you how to do. I think let's next just go to the desktop directory, and I'll show you how to work with files and folders. So just go back into Kali, go into desktop, and I'll show you some things from within here. So first off, if you ever need to re-enter a command you previously entered in, you can hit the up key on your keyboard. This will cycle through previously entered in commands. So if you need to quickly re-enter a command, or if you want to enter in a different command, it allows you to quickly go ahead and do that without having to type out the whole thing. Another cool thing you can do is use the tab key on your keyboard. Let's say you want to autofill a directory. If I do ls within just my home directory here, you see I have desktop, downloads, music, yada, 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 yada. If I start typing cd /mu, at this point, I could hit the tab key and it autofills with music. Isn't that pretty awesome? So this can save you a lot of time by autofilling. If I try to autofill something that has more than one possibility, like cd /d, I have desktop, downloads, and documents could all be possibilities. So it can't autofill things that have more than one possibility, but it's going to give you them. So you can say, okay, I had desktop, documents, downloads. So I'll type DO. And now I have documents, downloads. If I type a C, and now there's only one possibility, and it'll autofill documents. Now, I'll show you how to make just an empty file or folder on a Linux system. I'll do a file first. So to do that, you can use a command called touch. This will make an empty file. So I'll make a file called file.txt. And as I did that, you immediately saw this little file show up on my desktop because I made it right here on desktop. And if I do an ls, you can see now I have file.txt. If you want to display the contents of a text file, you can use a command called cat. And if I cat out file.txt, you're going to see nothing is there because it's an empty file. So let's go ahead and let's actually put some stuff inside file.txt. So I'm going to open up file.txt using a tool called Nano. Now, there are a number of text editors you can choose to use on Nano. Vi or Vim is probably the most common one, but there's a pretty significant learning curve to that. So to keep things easy, I'll use Nano, which is an easy to use command line text editor. So I'm going to nano file.txt, and this is a text editor, again, very similar to Notepad if you worked in Windows before. And I'll do like one line of text. Jim was here. He likes Nano. And now let's say you want to exit this or save this document. At the bottom here, you get this little cheat sheet that'll tell you how to do certain actions. You see uptick G, uptick X. And what this little uptick actually is a caret. This caret signifies control. So if you want to exit as an example, hold down Control on your keyboard and type and hit the X key. So Control X. And it's going to ask me if I want to save this file. I can type Y for yes. You can type in a file name. So I'll keep the existing file name, which is file.txt, and hit enter. And it is now saved. So if I move up and re-enter in cat file.txt, it's going to open up my file and say, Jim was here, he likes Nano. And I can edit this file again by going back into Nano and editing it. So I have this file, and let's say now I want to move it into a directory. Well, let's first make a directory or a folder. To do that, you can use the command called mkdir, M-K-D-I-R, stands for make directory. I'm going to make a folder called stuff. As you can see, it just appeared on my desktop, and I can do ls, and you'll see stuff is also now listed here on my terminal. And it's blue, it's color-coded, which is handy to know, and then the white is just a general file. So if I want to move this file into my stuff folder, I can use the command called move. It actually is abbreviated MV. So I will move file.txt into stuff. Just like that, you now don't see file on desktop anymore because it was moved into stuff. If you wanted to make a copy of this file, you could use the command cp. cp will allow you to make copies of files. Now I have two. If I cat out file2.txt, it'll have the same contents as just file.txt. Let's say you wanted to delete a file. To do that, you can use the command called rm, stands for remove. I can remove file.txt, and it is now gone. Now, I want to be mindful of that when you use this command. It doesn't actually warn you, it just deletes the file. So if you enter in this command, file is gone. Just be mindful of that. Now, let's say I wanted to make a copy of the stuff directory. You might be thinking, oh, I'll just use cp. And it's not going to work. So cp only works with files. If you want to copy a directory or more than one object or file, you have to use this switch. Now, within a command line, you can use just a single command like cp, or you can add on a switch. A switch can be done either using a slash or a dash. And what this will do is allow you to add in additional options to a command you're trying to run. So a -r in this case will mean, which means dash recursive. So essentially copy more than one thing, do more than one action. If you're unsure what the switches are for a command, you could always Google online, which is probably the easiest thing to do. Or you can try doing a question mark or -- help. And this will generally get you into a manual or to some sort of help information that will give you some instructions on how to use specific commands. And these will list out all the various switches and options that you can use. So let's say now I wanted to copy stuff. So cp-r stuff to stuff 2. And now we have stuff 2. I can even ls stuff 2. And whoops, I actually want to move into stuff 2. And now if I ls, I'll see it. And another switch that's commonly used with ls is ls-l, which stands for the long version. And this will give you some additional information. This will tell you what permissions are set to a file or folder. And these are Linux file permissions. We're not going to talk about them in this video, but just as an FYI. This will tell you who owns a file and what group that user is a member of. And this will tell you when the file was modified. So as an example, as an instructor, if I'm looking at students' work, I might look at this to see if they were working on things like past the deadline, as an example. But that'll also give you some additional information. Okay. So if you want to remove a directory, if you try to do remove and then type in the directory name, it's going to warn you. So it is nice that it will give you kind of a safeguard if you accidentally try to delete more than one thing. If you try to just delete one file, it's going to remove it and it's going to be gone for good. If you try to remove a directory, it's going to warn you. So if you do actually want to delete a directory, you have to do rm-rf / and then the directory name. And what this is going to do is it's going to recursively delete the directory and force it. Now, this is a very dangerous command. This will allow you to delete anything without warning. If I hit the enter key in my keyboard, it's gone. No warning, never coming back. Now, I just deleted a small directory with one thing in there, but you could run the same command against the entire file system, and you could delete everything with just as much ease and by accident. So be very careful of that. Now, I want to show you that if I try to move into the root directory and do something like make a file, it's going to say permission denied. So most Linux distributions will have you run the system as a regular user, so not as an administrator. So when you start to move into system directories or directories outside of your home directory, you might start running into permission denied errors. Or if you try to install an application, it might say permission denied. Now, to overcome this, you have to use a command called sudo. Now, the way that this works is your user account will be put in this thing known as a sudoers file. This is a file on the Linux system that essentially specifies who is allowed to do administrative actions. So you type in sudo and say, hey, I'm currently a regular user, but I want to do something that requires special permissions. And this is kind of a safeguard to prevent regular users from accidentally screwing up a whole system. So let's say I wanted to create that file. I would do sudo touch file.txt. It's going to say, okay, we're going to let you make that file, but you need to prove that you actually are the CLI user. So give me that CLI password. A lot of times if you're on a computer, you might like walk away to use the bathroom or grab a snack or whatever reason. And if your computer is open and unlocked, someone else could just walk up to it and start doing stuff. And as a security feature, most Linux operating systems, the first time you try to use sudo within a period of 15 minutes or so, it's going to ask you for the password. So that way it confirms that you are who you really say you are. So I'll type in my password, hit enter, and now as you're going to see, I have file.txt. If I try to create a second file, it's not going to ask me for a password again. And that's because I literally just typed in my admin password, so the system knows that it's likely I'm still here sitting in front of the computer. If I were to walk away for 15 or 20 minutes and come back, it'd probably prompt me again. So now that I've entered in sudo, I can use it to remove and do anything I want within the system files. If I forget to use sudo, it's going to warn me because it's in a system directory and it's write protected. And then it's going to say, okay, I tried, and it's not going to work because I'm not using sudo. So you have to make sure you use sudo when you are not working in your own home directory. And it's now gone. So I'm trying to think about what I want to show you next. How about some networking commands? So let's do IP address. add address. There we go. This will give you IP information about a system. So if you're wondering what your IP address is, what your interface names are, this will give you all that really good information. So here is our local loopback address and our Ethernet address. You can also abbreviate this. So I did IP address, but you can also do IPA, and it'll autocomplete and work as well, which is pretty cool. So for those of you that have maybe tinkered around with configuring like networking equipment like routers and switches, being able to abbreviate is a very common concept, especially within like the realm of like Cisco equipment. So you can do IPA, and it'll work just as well. Another common command is ping. This is also one that works just as fine in Windows, but this is also a Linux command. So you can ping a website or a service or an IP address, and you can see if it's online. It'll reply back with its host name and the response time and all that other good stuff. And you can do Control-C to stop it. That will break the command. So up-C. Control-C will oftentimes break a command. Another one that is good to know. There are so many commands. I'm trying to think about what's the best one to show you guys. Ooh, I have another good one. How about top? So this is one that I'll commonly use. This is like the task manager of a Linux environment. So within Windows, you have, the task manager that'll show you how much processing power is being used, what services are running. The top, T-O-P, top command in Linux, I will do exactly the same thing, just in a text format. And again, to stop this, you use Control-C, and that will stop it. If you ever want the full path to where you currently are, so let's say I'm in my home directory. If you want to know the full path to your home folder, you can use the command pwd. Stands for present working directory. Other commands such as, say like the whoami command. This will tell you what user you're currently logged in as a system as. And I'll start to show you some more advanced ones. So let's say I have a text file. So I'm just gonna nano into a new file. Let's call it gym.txt. So I can just do a bunch of stuff in this file. So Jim was here. He likes to use Linux. So what I can do now is I'm going to show you this command called grep, G-R-E-P. This is a really, really useful command because a lot of times when you're working in a command line environment, you're going to be pulling a lot of information out. And it's going to be quickly streaming across the screen in this small terminal window. So let's say you're trying to search or find some specific piece of information. Grep will allow you to essentially find it. So inside of this, if I do cat, inside of this gym.txt file, you'll notice, for example, I have the phrase he likes. So what I can do is find that phrase. So I could say cat gym.txt, and then I'll use this pipe and use grep he likes. And hypothetically, if this works, it's going to display the contents of gym.txt and then run this second command. And that's right, you can run more than one command together. That's what this bar will do. It'll allow you to run more than one command at a time. And to enter in this bar, it's right above your enter key on the right-hand side of your keyboard. Hold down Shift, and you can type the key on your keyboard, and it'll pop in just like that. So grep is going to search for the string or the term he likes. And when it finds it, it'll show it on the screen. Now, let's say there isn't a term called he likes. Like, let's say I did she likes. Nothing is going to be returned because that term doesn't exist. So if I do grep for blah, you don't see it. If I do grep for Jim, you will see it because that is a matching term in a file. So it's a really easy way to find certain things. If I do grep for he, you can see now it gives us a couple of different things. It says, okay, we found a couple of different matches. We found here and he likes. So again, very useful. The other thing I'll show you, I think, as a parting thing is I'll talk a little bit about updates. So one really awesome feature about most modern Linux distributions is that they're going to have a package manager built in. This is how you can both install new applications and update existing applications. Now, there are a couple different package managers that exist out there. So depending on what distribution your Linux operating system was originally based off of may determine of which package manager is used. So in systems like Kali Linux, that's based off of Debian. So another good example would be Ubuntu. You can use the tool apt-get. And with tools that distributions that are based off of like CentOS, based off of Red Hat, like CentOS, you'll be using tools such as yum instead. So in order to update this system, you would use apt-get. So you would say apt-get update. Now, this isn't going to work because I need to make sure I use sudo. When you install an application or a package on a system, generally speaking, it's going to install it system-wide. So you need to have permissions to be able to do that. So you need to use sudo. And this is going to update your system. It's going to query any repositories that you have configured for your update tool. By default, the standard ones are built in for operating system updates and common tool updates. Now, what's cool about this is you can also add in other locations into your repository. So if you wanted to update or maintain some other software, you could easily do that. But the default repositories or repos are generally just fine. If you wanted to install a new tool, you could use sudo apt-get install and then the tool name. So like maybe a Python. You could do sudo apt-get install Python 3, and it's going to say either it's already installed, it can't find it, or it'll ask you if you want to install it. I don't have any good examples of packages that aren't installed. Maybe VLC. I don't know if VLC is in here. Let's try that. VLC. Yeah, here's an example. So VLC is like a video player. It's not installed by default, obviously. So it's asking me if I want to install it, and I can say yes, and it's going to install VLC. So a really great way to quickly install and update packages. Now, I'm showing you apt-get, but if you try to use apt-get on like a CentOS box or a Red Hat box, which is a different Linux distribution, it's not going to work. In those cases, you have to use a tool known as yum. So the package managers are a little bit different. Okay, I was going to say. And the speed at which a package takes to install is going to be determined on the size of an application. Like anything else, if you install a really big app, it's going to take 15 minutes maybe. If you install something small like VLC, it's going to happen quicker. And sometimes they do fail, like whatever reason, VLC failed to install, and you can troubleshoot this stuff if you want. But it was just a demo, so I'm not going to worry about that for too much for now. But yeah, so that's it for now. When you're done, you can just exit out of it. So type in exit, and you can exit. If you wanted to restart the system, you can do that using the commands called restart or shut down with a -R flag. There's a lot of different things you can do, and again, this is just an intro. So what I'll do is I'll post a few other resources down in the description below the video, so that way if you want to take a look at some of the other articles and learn about more of the other commands you can use, you are welcome and encouraged to do so. So as always, feel free to let me know if you have any comments or questions. Otherwise, I will talk to you all later.